last 5 years, we've lost 1.2 million people. We did a survey of CEOs. Are you planning to stay in the state? Over 50% say that they're thinking of relocating their operations. And that's why jobs increasingly are leaving the state, and that's why California ranks number 49 in job growth. There's no greater loss to an economy than the loss of human capital, and that's what's happening.
Our guest today is Dr. Jim Doti, economist and president emeritus of Chapman University. Today, he'll talk about his latest findings on California exodus. He will shed some insights on the demographics of people who are leaving California, why they're leaving, and its impacts on California's job market and economy.
There's something else we uncovered by looking into the data, IRS data. 70% of those leaving the state is being made by people making over $200,000. It's not easy to move. It's not easy to uproot yourself, get the kids out of school and buy a home, and especially in these days with high interest rates. Why are people doing that?
I'm Siyamak Khorrami. Welcome to California Insider. Jim, it's great to have you on back. Welcome back.
Thank you, Siyamak. Great to be on the show.
You know, you've been studying the California exodus and the economy of California and national economy, but we were really interested to see what's going on with the exodus. Can you tell us what's happening?
Yeah, the numbers have been revised recently, but the most recent numbers that have been produced suggest that roughly for the last couple of years, 300,000 people on net balance, more 300,000 people have left the state than those that have come in.
More people left.
So if you add all those that left the state, subtract those that are coming into the state, the net loss roughly around 300,000 the last couple of years. And that's been steadily increasing from 50 to 100. The last 5 years, to put into perspective, last 5 years, we've lost 1.2 million people.
1.2 million people
in the
net
last 5 years.
Or total people that have left?
1.2 people more have left the state
Wow.
than have come in. Another interesting thing is that the Department of Finance of California, they do a population estimate. And for the longest time, the population estimates through 2030 haven't changed, in spite of this outflow. But recently, about 6 months ago, they revised their estimates. So they are now they're finally recognizing this outflow and how significant it is. And to point out how significant it is, they revised the estimate and brought the estimate to 2030 for California. They reduced it by 2.5 million people. That's roughly the population of Chicago, 2.5 million people. All of a sudden, they revised it. And the fact that they revised it down and the revision is based on this outflow is obvious because they lowered the population estimate in 2023 by 1.2 million people, down. And that's the net outflow of people who've left the state.
And do you think this trend is going to change? I know you guys have been ahead of the curve. You've been talking about this for many years, your research group and your university, and you have been vocal about this too. And is this trend going to continue? What are your thoughts?
Hard to say, but given the problems that the state is facing, and the fact that Sacramento doesn't seem to be doing anything about it. In fact, things are getting worse. We have a deficit. It's unlikely taxes are going to be reduced. And it could get worse because other states are actually reducing income taxes, state income taxes, like Iowa. The only state whose job growth was less than California over the last year, only one state was lower, Iowa. And what is Iowa doing? They are reducing its state income tax. They recognize there's a problem. And why are people leaving? That's the question that needs to be asked. Well, our research shows not just California, people are leaving states that have higher income taxes and state and local taxes in general. We did an analysis. We took 50 states, we broke it down into those that had the lowest lowest taxes. The 10 lowest tax states increased population significantly. Net migration was positive, and the 10 states that had the highest taxes had the greatest outflow. California, of course, is among those states. But you also had New Jersey, New York, Illinois, other high tax states lose population. People are voting with their feet. But there's something else we uncovered, Chapman uncovered, by looking into the data, IRS data specifically, that an increasing proportion of the people moving out of the state are higher income.
You found that based on the IRS information?
We looked at adjusted gross income. So we looked at the IRS has very accurate numbers on people leaving the state and moving into the state. And the reason they have that is because they need to keep tabs on where people are living that are paying taxes. This is at the federal level. So we're able to see the outflow of California, not just the numbers, but the adjusted gross income. That's what we pay our tax on.
Do you know exactly like how much was the income of the people?
Well, within
the
ranges,
range, okay.
Within 100, 200, 200 to 300. So let me give you an example. We looked at the adjusted gross income of those people who left the state who have AGI, adjusted gross income, over 200,000. If you go back 5 years, the proportion of the people leaving the state that had AGI over 200,000 was roughly 40%. In the most recent year, 2022, it was 70%. So 70% of the adjusted gross income of those leaving the state is being made by people making over $200,000 in AGI. That's why our state is in a fiscal mess. Think of it. If so many people are leaving the state that are high income, that means tax revenues will drop. And if tax revenues drop, the deficit increases, and that's why we're facing a $70 billion deficit in the state of California in the current fiscal year.
Now, before we get into the deficit and see where we're going with that, the economy of California hasn't been growing as fast as the rest of the country. Is this true?
Well, in terms of job growth, for example, it's the best measure of economic growth, the most accurate. California's job growth from mid-2022 to mid-2023, California ranked 49th, only Iowa being lower.
And why is that?
Well, we're losing jobs. Not only are people leaving why are people leaving the state? When you look at this drop and this negative outflow, they're chasing jobs. The jobs are being created in Texas, in Florida, in Utah, in Washington, states that have zero income tax. Not only is it taxes, it's business regulation. So companies increasingly are looking to reduce its own costs, taxation and business regulation, so they're moving to other states, and people are chasing those jobs, and that's leading to this outflow. That's why we're losing people. We're also losing jobs as well, and that's why job growth in California is as low as it is, because not only are people leaving the state, businesses are as well.
Now, Jim, what do you think will happen to the California economy? Some people say that this is a really robust economy. It's not going to get impacted by, can you tell us what are your thoughts?
Well, there's one great strength, the state of California, one great strength, and that is the fact that we have a relatively high proportion of high-paying jobs in what are called advanced industries, technology, the Silicon Valley, San Jose, Santa Clara, San Francisco. The fact that we attract so much investment in the state, venture capital moves into the state of California because of those industries. Apple, Microsoft, all these companies that are located in California, in the Silicon Valley, and to a certain extent San Diego, Orange County, and even LA.
Biotech, medical devices,
but the problem is when you look at growth in those industries, in California, we have at Chapman University, our Center for Economic Research, the most comprehensive database on growth of advanced industries, which include, as you just point out, medical products as part of that. It's not just computers and technology,
it's
but
biotech,
it's aerospace, high-paying jobs that pay roughly 2 to 3 times the overall average in the nation. Okay, so when you look at these jobs in California, in 2005, California had 20% of all of the advanced jobs in the nation. California roughly had 20%, which is higher than our population.
Our population is like 8-9%.
Yeah,
right?
about 10%, something like that. A little bit less now because of our drop in population. But if we had something like 10%, in terms of advanced jobs, we had 20%. So we had a disproportionately high number of jobs.
So we have better jobs here in California.
In 2005. If you now go back to the most recent period, because we're able to track this every quarter, we've been doing it every year since 2005, the proportion has remained at 20%. It hasn't dropped, so California is still relatively strong, 20%, given the fact that our population is 10. So we've been able to maintain that. But if you look at the lowest cost states in terms of taxation, which we did, we took the states that have the lowest 15 states in terms of their rank in state and local taxes, and you put them together, the proportion of advanced jobs for all of these states, these 15 states, is increased from 25% to roughly 35%. So while California has been stagnant, other low-cost states are beginning to take over, and more advanced jobs are being created outside of California. So while California has maintained its competitive position in terms of advanced jobs, it's beginning to lose the race, if you will, to other states that have low taxes.
For the new opportunities.
New advanced jobs. They're being formed in what they call Silicon Slopes in Salt Lake City, where the growth rate is much higher. Areas of Tennessee, the Triangle in North and South Carolina, and of course Texas, not just in Dallas and Houston, but Austin as well. Very rapid growth in these areas, and faster growth in these areas than California. California is holding its own, and it's easy to see why. When you have the kind of companies we have in California, Apple, for example, it's a magnet in attracting other tech firms that feed off of this industry, especially venture capital, which attract a great deal of venture capital goes to California. So we've been able to maintain that position, but we're losing the growth that's going to other low-cost states.
It hasn't felt like people are leaving the state. Is this why? Because we are kind of stagnant. We don't feel the changes yet.
Well, it's more than, we're actually losing population. Our population has basically dropped from 40 million to 39 million. So we lost 1 million already. Like I say, it's significant. The loss is 1.2 million people over the last 5 years. And as I point out, through the year 2030, California is not expected to grow in population and actually decline over that period of time. What a reversal from the 60s and 70s and 80s of the 20th century, when California was a magnet for business growth, and now we're stagnant. The best one can say is that we're not growing. The one area where we've been able to at least maintain jobs is in high tech and advanced industries, but we're not growing. We're just maintaining our share, and I'm afraid that over time we may actually begin losing share.
Jim, we have been covering this for the last few years, and we actually made a documentary on this exodus, but the governor claimed that this exodus doesn't exist or is not real. More people have come to California than have gone to Florida. Something like that he told in a few interviews and on the debate. What are your thoughts on this?
It's nonsense. If you transcribe his response to why are so many people leaving California. And what he recently was quoted in the Washington Post on a speech he gave there, and it's there in black and white. His response was, oh, that's nonsense. We are doing the best we can in attracting exit visas and immigration, and we're the #1 state. He's not commenting on net domestic migration. He's totally looking at an irrelevant statistic, and that is international migration, and saying it had something to do, made no sense, something to do with when Trump was president, his visa policies. And it has nothing at all to do with domestic migration. What's amazing to me, Siyamak, is the fact that when he's asked these questions, he can say whatever he wants, things that don't make any sense or are absolutely untrue in terms of the data that is out there. Let me again state the facts. Over the last 5 years, you look at IRS data or data from the Bureau of the Census, we have lost on net balance 1.2 million people. Where are those people going in the main? Almost all going to Texas, Florida, Utah, Washington. No income tax states. The data is out there. If the governor were here and you can pin him down, which you can't, and pin him down with the data, it's clear that's what's happening.
We had a chance to ask Governor Newsom about this during the budget press conference. Here's what he told us.
I think you guys are familiar, been around a long time. This is a story written every 10 years in California. 1994, Time magazine, the end of California, same arguments. California is a tentpole of the American economy in terms of American recovery, in terms of job creation, innovation, entrepreneurial spirit. We gave you a demonstrable example of that on quantum and immunology and the work we're doing, research and development, pushing out the boundaries of discovery. It's the reason Elon Musk came back, couldn't get enough of the top engineers in the country, had to come back to Silicon Valley. The reason AI dominates in California, dominates. No one comes close. 35 of the top 50 companies, market cap companies in the world are in the state of California. San Francisco's seen dramatic investments and growth in that space. More scientists, researchers, Nobel laureates, engineers, patents than any other state in America. One of the top growing economies of the last 5 years. So I just dismiss with respect that narrative. That's just folks painting a picture and coloring it in because they're just focusing on one side of the ledger. And I just couldn't be more proud of the resiliency of this state and how many new taxpayers. You take a look at finance. This would be a great article for Epoch Times. Take a look at finance, that what they just put out. You should stress test it. A number of people earning over $50 million in this state, record-breaking. The last 3 years, more than the last 10 years combined. The number of new millionaires printed in the state of California, unprecedented in state's history just in the last few years. So we're just one of these states. We're a conveyor belt for talent. When someone decides to move out of the home, we have 15 new opportunities for people to come in and get the benefits of our partnerships and our support, the UCs and CSUs, community colleges, and all the benefits of this state. And so we're just the greatest wealth creator in the world, California, and we continue to dominate in that space. And you'll see that on the basis of finance's own assessment, on the basis of tax receipts. And I just think it tells a very different story than the story of 3 years ago, because Elon decided to get his capital gains deferred in Texas.
Thank you, Governor.
Now, do you think when we don't acknowledge an exodus like this, do you think there's at the big state level, whether it's the legislature or the leadership governor, do you think there's an impact to this?
Yeah, because you're not doing anything about it. You're not going to the root cause. If you have a problem, if you recognize an issue, people are walking with their feet. People are leaving this beautiful state with the oceans, the mountains, this incredible climate, leaving this beautiful state to move to Texas and all the heat and humidity, Florida, all the bugs and everything else. Why are they doing? It's not easy to move. It's not easy to uproot yourself, get the kids out of school and buy a home, and especially in these days with high interest rate, they may have to sell their home with a mortgage of 3% to take on a mortgage of 6 or 7%. Why are people doing that? That question needs to be asked. If the governor doesn't face up to that, then you're not going to ever get to the root problem. So in terms of being a change agent, in terms of being an effective leader, you have to ask the question, why is that happening? And then come up with, once you find out why it's happening, then you can begin to develop solutions and strategies to change it. If you don't recognize a problem and just come up with nonsense and say it's not happening, like the emperor with no clothes, which is basically what's happening, then we are not going to develop the strategies that will reverse this negative trend.
This episode is sponsored by Midas Gold Group. Do you feel the bills are getting higher and higher every time you check out the grocery store? Do you feel your monthly discretionary money has decreased, although your income increases yearly? Inflation is eating away at your wealth. Digital wallets and central banks' digital currencies are destroying financial privatization. Only gold and silver are constitutional forms of money. Our privacy was to be protected against unlawful watch and seizure. Midas Gold Group will help you take control of your finances and protect your wealth and your privacy. Pulling money out of the questionable banking and investment system is the way to privatize your finances as the elite push us towards digital wallets and central bank digital currency. Protect your wealth with real money. Deal with the best at Midas Gold Group, a proud America First company. You can check them out at midasgoldgroup.com. Click on the link below and check them out. Now let's go back to the interview.
Now, Jim, what about the housing? One of the things that kind of we're wondering about is the housing costs are kind of unexplainable in California. Like you almost have to make a few $100,000 to just afford to buy a normal home.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that? Some people say that this exodus, what's going on with the housing? Why does the cost of housing doesn't go down?
Our research, and we were looking at the numbers, and this is what, once you determine why are people leaving the state, and you recognize it's happening, it's out there, the data is clear, then at the Center for Economic Research, we began looking at studies. We looked at all 50 states, we looked at differences in housing costs, we looked at differences in business regulation and differences in taxation. And econometric research, the research we conduct at the center, shows statistically, and it's very significant, the findings, that the reason they're leaving the state, two reasons, high taxation and high business regulation. We did a survey of CEOs. Why are you planning to stay in the state? And many said that they're thinking of moving. Over 50% say that they're thinking of relocating their operations. And they're asked why. Two reasons. Number one, business regulation that's excessive in California. Secondly, high rates of taxation. Housing costs don't enter into that response. It's a distant third. And in our regression findings, we didn't find it to be a major factor. Because while no question California will always have higher costs now, because land costs are higher because it's such a desirable place in terms of the amenities that California offers. More people would like to live in a state where the summers are temperate, the winters are temperate. I'm from Chicago. I know when I moved from Chicago, there was no way I was going to go back. So as a result, I want to live here. Many more people want to live here. That increases the demand. Now, no question, housing costs are higher than they otherwise would be because of regulations, but that's not the primary reason people are leaving the state.
Jim, do you think that businesses are avoiding, if you were going to start a company, some people are avoiding coming into California that in the past would probably wanted to California and start?
Certainly. Yeah, who wants to be, if you're an emerging new business, why would you want to deal with all of the expenses, not just income tax or high corporate taxes that you pay on profits, but more all the costs relating to hiring workers, all the regulations relating to hiring workers, the additional unemployment compensation fund that you have to create for your workers, where we're actually in deficit in California. Why would a new business in a very competitive economic environment, globally competitive, wouldn't you as a CEO want to locate in a lower cost area where regulations are lower so you can compete more effectively? It's not going to be in California. And that's why jobs increasingly are leaving the state, and that's why California ranks number 49 in job growth, because the job, not only are people exiting the state, but jobs are as well, because CEOs don't want to be confronted and forced to pay higher costs than a business in another state, and they'll find that they're not going to be able to compete with businesses in those other states because their costs are lower.
Now, Jim, what about the economy of California? One thing we wanted to learn today as well from you, what's happening with the economy of California and housing costs. Do you think the housing costs, based on your research, do you think the housing costs are going to stay here, or are they going to ease up? Or
housing will remain high, but I really believe that what's going to happen is that housing costs will begin to increase in other areas and other states at a faster rate, much faster rate than California. So the disproportionate, the difference in California housing, which is so high compared to the national average, double. You know, if you look at
and the pays are not double. The income is not double.
For example, median family, the cost of a median priced home in Southern California is roughly $1 million, and it's half that in the nation. I think that disparity will level off, because as people leave the state and move to California, to Texas, Florida, Utah,
they're going to raise the prices.
That's going to raise the price. It's already happening in Texas, and it's happening in Montana. People are complaining because these Californians are pushing up housing costs because the demand is so high. And as a result, as they leave, that will tend to reduce the pressure on California housing. California housing prices will not increase as much. Take this as an example. Okay, over the last 5 years, I mentioned we lost 1.2 million people, okay? 1.2. If the governor wants to contest that, please bring him on, and I will show two different sources.
We would love to have him on the show.
I'd love to have him on, because I could show. Let's look at the numbers, Mr. Governor, and see where. And no question, it's a loss of 1.2 million. But to convert that into housing, think of this. On average, roughly there are 2.7 persons per household. If you lose 1.2 million people, if they're leaving, look at all of the vacated homes. All you do is take the 1.2 million people, divide that by the fact that there are 2.7 people per home. You're talking about roughly like
400,000 plus
400,000 homes that are all of a sudden are vacant. So you have, as a result of that, that's changing the dynamics of housing. All of a sudden, you don't have to build as many new homes, because you have all of these newly empty homes that can be sold to those people who are continuing to live here. That will reduce price pressure on California homes. But as more and more people move out, housing prices will increase, so the imbalance, that 1 million to 500, will reduce.
Will get adjusted.
But it will never get to the point where California is actually lower or the same, because the amenities
it's
of
a very
living
desirable
there.
Place.
Exactly.
And now, what about the economy and job creation? Do you think the economy here will grow at the same rate it's been growing in the last few decades, or do you think it will?
Oh, much lower. The fact that businesses are leaving the state and taking their jobs with them, means that until we get to the root causes and first of all recognize the problem and then study what can we do about them, if that's going to be totally ignored and short shrift and just say it's not happening and come up with preposterous reasons that try to explain it away, you're never going to get to the things we need to do to reverse that process.
Before we continue, we would like to thank Shenyun for sponsoring this channel. I lived in China for 2 years and experienced 2 different Chinas. One is the China we know now, unfortunately with communism. And the other is ancient Chinese culture with 5,000 years of history, strong values, ethics and morality that has been lost. Shenyun Performing Arts is reviving this 5,000 years of Chinese traditional culture. It takes you back in time to magical world of ancient China with a unique blend of brilliant dancing, beautiful costumes, and legends coming to life. Go to shenyun.com to find out the schedule and theater information. It's a lifetime experience you don't want to miss.
Just so inspiring. It makes me want to go dance.
Breathtaking. I was very impressed. I'm taking my program and I'm going to mention it on the news because I think it's a great performance and people should see it.
What I loved about the show was the authenticity of it. It was taking me on a journey.
Exceptional. The technique involved, that the thousands of hours of training.
People just float. Everything was exact, and then they worked to the exact moment, and it was beautiful.
You go away feeling with a smile in your heart from it.
Have to come. Life-changing.
Make sure you see it. Make sure you see it.
Don't wait. Get your tickets now.
You know, the state leaders are probably in a very tough situation now. We have this budget deficit as well. And it's not easy to be a governor. It's not easy to be a state legislature because you have all these people and they all have these ideas. And sometimes you probably try to protect yourself and try to interpret the data in a way you want to interpret it.
Yeah.
And what are your recommendations for the governor and the leaders of the state? A lot of them do watch this show.
Well, actually, my co-authors, Jerry Parsky, very distinguished former public servant, a very successful business person. Tom Campbell, former dean of the Haas School of Business at Berkeley, now on the faculty at Chapman University. We wrote an article and we suggested that since we have identified taxes as one of the major reason, business regulation being the other, but since income tax is a major factor explaining why people are leaving the state. We have evidence to support that. I won't get into, but we have compelling evidence that shows that it's our high income tax. So we wrote an article that suggested that we reduced the income tax rate 1% across the board. Should be much greater reduction at the high levels, but that would never even be considered. A simple 1% drop. So we knew that the Assembly and the Senate in Sacramento would not even touch it. So all we did was to suggest, Siyamak, all we did was to say, can there be legislation that would ask the Department of Finance to study the issue and determine whether reducing taxes might lead to an increase in revenues because it will stem the flow of people leaving the state. Just a study to do that. No legislator would even touch it. And since we're a one-party state, all legislation has to be promulgated or introduced by a Democrat. No Democrat would even look at doing a study, let alone actually doing what's necessary, and that is to reduce taxes. What I'm fearful of, we have a $70 billion deficit. By constitution, state constitution, we cannot have a budget in deficit. How do you deal with a $70 billion deficit? Any deficit will have to be eliminated in the next fiscal year, which would be 24-25. You cannot introduce a budget that's in deficit. So somehow you're going to take the existing deficit, which is $70 billion, and eliminate it in the next fiscal period. What will likely happen? Well, I can't help but think, I'm not certain of this, but that taxes, instead of going down, which we think might have a positive impact on revenues, that they'll in all likelihood be increased. That's and that will have exactly the opposite effect and will increase the incentive for people to leave the state if taxes are increased.
And how does that make you feel, being a Californian? You built this university here in this community.
One thing, as someone who's still involved in, at Chapman, I was president for 25 years. We built a school of engineering. We developed a great program in health studies. We have a graduate program in health studies. We're producing physician assistants, pharmacists, physical therapists, engineers. Isn't it a pity that those graduates from schools like Chapman, UCI, Cal State Fullerton, UCLA, Berkeley, all of these, a good proportion of them will leave the state for jobs outside of California when we have this investment in this human capital that we're creating, that they're going to leave the state. There's no greater loss to an economy than the loss of human capital, and that's what's happening. It's tragic.
If you want to understand the root cause of California exodus and stay ahead of the trend, you should definitely check out our documentary, Leaving California, The Untold Story. It's our most groundbreaking documentary up to date with over 1.7 million views on Epoch TV. People have been saying it's one of the most eye-opening documentaries that they have watched. Dr. Jim Doti is also featured in the documentary, and we're going to show you an excerpt of his segment.
As more and more people leave the state, it's not only a loss of tax revenues. The greatest loss to an area, to a state, is the loss of human capital. Not just jobs or business, let's personalize human capital. That's the greatest source of wealth. And if graduate students that don't even stay in California, but move to Texas and Florida, it will have a negative impact that is magnified because we're losing our best and brightest. How many of you, when you graduate, plan to leave and go to another state? Okay, why do you plan to leave?
I think everything's too expensive and I just don't like a lot of things about it.
Ah, okay. That's what a lot of people, you're not alone. And a lot of people think they're being taxed to death. And you may not be worried about that now, but when your income increases, your personal income goes up, and you find yourself paying 15% in personal income tax rate over and above the federal rate, you may decide, let me move to Florida, Texas, maybe Nevada, where the state income tax rate is 0. So people are moving with their feet.
Now, do you have any other thoughts for our audience? Is there anything that people of California can do about this?
It's not a rocket science, Siyamak. We've identified the problem. The thing we need to do is to, as quickly as possible, reduce taxes, and we need to reduce business regulation. Jerry Parsky was on a commission 20 years ago to come up with, this was a state commission that was started by the governor. It was, I believe, Governor Schwarzenegger, to look at ways to do that. The legislature simply ignored it. We need leadership in the state that will recognize we have a problem and have the wherewithal, the courage to do something about it. I have a friend who lives in Las Vegas, good friend, left the state because of the high, of a 13.5% marginal state income tax, 13.5%. And this person's income was high enough where that was significant. We're talking about millions of dollars. When he saw the article that Jerry Parsky, Tom Campbell, and I wrote on reducing the tax rate a minuscule 1%, he said, Jim, are you crazy? Do you think I'm going to come back if the rate is 12.5% instead of 13.5%? No way. So we need to, and we can't even get a 1% decrease to a study, let alone actually happening. It's pathetic, absolutely pathetic.
Jim, Any hope for our audience?
Well, in Orange County, one thing we were able to do, and this has also been looked at by other researchers, and they've come up with the same findings. In our data on advanced industries, we not only do it by state, more importantly, we do it for 50 different metropolitan statistical areas, including Orange County, which is not an MSA, it's a county, but we included Orange County because we wanted to look at it. But 50 in the nation. And that's the basis for that analysis I mentioned before, that California has been stagnant in the growth of these high-tech jobs. The one very positive thing we uncovered, and others as well have, in Orange County, we have the largest share of medical product companies. Of all the 50, we rank number one, not just in percentage terms, but in the number of jobs, that we have 20,000 jobs in that very, very important sector. We can grow from that, and that's in Orange County. So I think that's something we can build on.
So there are some industries, there's specific industries that we're doing well here.
Yeah, and if we had lower taxes and lower regulation, we'd have even more.
Dr. Doti, President Emeritus of Chapman University and economist, it was great to have you on California Insider.
Thanks, and thanks for inviting me to be on this very important show that gets these issues out to the public.
Thank you.
If you haven't checked out californiainsider.com, we highly recommend you do that now, because we're going to have a lot of news and videos there. And on top of what we have there right now, we are building a really big platform to cover what's happening in California, so you can be informed. We're going to have more shows, more videos from all aspects of life in California. Go to californiainsider.com and we'll see you there.